Hello, everybody. Oh, it says we are live. Look at that. I think things are working. Welcome to the Right On Con live Q&A today with me. I am Jess Keating, and you might know me from such books as Pink is for Blobfish. What else do I have here? Cute as an axolotl. One more of these bad boys. What Makes a Monster? And Shark Lady. Da, 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 da. And I'm here today to answer your questions all about author branding. So where to begin? I thought, since hopefully I already have one question up here and hopefully we get a couple more as people come in here. I thought I would talk a little bit about 5 points about author branding that I think are kind of important to keep in mind. The funny thing about branding is that I always am reminded of the branding like that farmers do to cows, like the very painful, symbol that we kind of jab onto our cows' haunches. So I think branding has a bit of a bad reputation and kind of a bad rap out there. So I really think it's important to approach branding from more of a mindful and kind aspect and state of mind. So hopefully this is something that will resonate with you guys. So 5 things that I wanted to mention really quickly before we get into questions. The very first of which is that number 1, you will be branded. And I mention this because I often have people come up to me if I'm doing workshops like this. They say to me, I don't want to worry about author branding because it feels really inauthentic. So I'm just going to forget about it completely and just kind of do what I want online. And it sounds like too much work, so I'm just going to hope for the best. That's great. But the downside is you will be branded anyway. And your brand is basically just what you're bringing to the table and sort of what you're known for, right? So even if you hardly ever tweet, even if you only tweet about pies or something like that, that will become your brand. So I believe as an author or as a writer, it is very, very important to realize, 1, you're already branded. So 2, you might as well be intentional about it. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. The second aspect about branding, there are some questions about like, what is it? We have this image of like the cow being stamped. I think your brand is more of the general vibe that you give yourself online, especially online. I mean, it's also in person too, but I think we're mainly talking about online today. So it is the vibe and sort of attitude and flair that you sort of bring to the table so people know what to expect when they encounter your books and you in real life. And one really good measure of this is if you have somebody send you something and say, this really reminded me of you when I was out in the real world, and they connect that to you and they send that to you, that is a really good indication of your author brand. So for example, you would not believe how many people I have had that send me photos of this bad boy saying he looks a lot like a particular political figure right now. I won't mention who, but there's a very famous political figure right now in the media who some people believe looks a lot like this guy. And I will tell you, I have seen so many emails of people sending to me, hey, look at this blobfish. I saw this guy and I thought of you. And that is it's kind of unfortunate, my poor inbox, right? But it's a really important thing to remember, because when you are online, there is always going to be something that you do or say that connects to other people in their real lives. And that right there, that thread between you online and other people living their lives, that is your author brand. So that is a really, really good way of sort of checking in with yourself about, what do people send me the most? What do they say reminds them of me the most? Because that is a really good indication of kind of where you're steering this author brand. So as I mentioned, this is the second point. It does change over time. I think it is very important to remember that we are not stagnant people. We don't want to be stagnant. We don't want to just kind of say, this is my target and I'm shooting for it, and that's going to be where I end up, and that's all I'm doing, and you kind of plant your flag, this is my author brand. It is okay to kind of always be exploring and constantly shifting and changing as your interests change, as your career changes. You might have different books come out at different times about different topics that you might want to incorporate more into your brand. So I approach it less as a target and more as I'm steering a ship. When you're steering a ship, you cannot just do a drastic, about face. It's more about gently aligning kind of in the water over time to get in the direction you'd like to be in. So I hope that is helpful there. The third point is when it comes to specifics, and I'll probably get into this hopefully a little bit more with the questions as well. When it comes to specifics, people always ask me like, okay, what specifically do I put online if I'm trying to, revitalize or rework my author brand? And my answer is always, your brand is what you value and the specific voice that you use when you're talking about it. So an example for me, if you take a look at my Twitter page, which is Jess_Keating, if you look at that, you're going to get a very, very accurate look of what I value personally as a real person, which sounds funny, but I mean, we're talking online here, and often what we see online is not genuine. But for me, you will find a lot of, crazy animal facts. You will find a lot of, pro-feminist content because I believe that people are equal, that type of thing. You will find, even today, I found this adorable little video of the teeny tiniest axolotl that I've ever seen in my whole life. That's the type of thing that I like to share. So it's a lot of science, it's a lot of humor. And I've also had people mention to me that, my public persona or branding is always very positive. And that's something that I have worked towards. So one thing I'd like to point out here is people always tend to think that branding is somehow inauthentic, like we're putting on a mask for the public. Look at how squeaky clean I am and look how, happy I am all the time. That's not the case. You do not have to put 100% of yourself online to be authentic. However, what you do put online should be 100% you. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm talking to myself in this little camera here, but hopefully you guys are sitting there thinking, okay, that makes sense. And a really good example of this, is even in me. Like, I am somebody who, full disclosure, I swear a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. In my real life, I just swear. It's just something that happens, and there it goes. But when I am putting things intentionally online, I am not dropping F-bombs every other tweet, because that is not reflective of me in the position that I want to be in with writing children's books. So that is something to keep in mind. Another really good example of this is I have a post online about this that I'll reference later, but we've got Ellen DeGeneres and Chelsea Handler, right? So these are both, amazing female comedians, but they occupy very, very different spheres of their comedic world. And I don't think that anybody would ever believe that Ellen has never had a snarky, kind of attitude-y thought about something negative. She does not share those negative thoughts in that way that maybe Chelsea Handler would, because that is not her brand. And likewise, Chelsea Handler is more known for being kind of snarky, edgy, and that sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't have all the different elements of her in her that Ellen might have. So really, it's a matter of what you value the most and the voice that you want to use to portray it, and being very, very aware that it is okay for you to not share everything about your personal life or even your work life. You just want to make sure that what you do share is actually something that has meaning to you. So my very, very last point, because we're probably going to hopefully be talking about a lot of different things here, I have done several workshops and seminars and stuff on branding and marketing and platform development. And what I've done is I've taken all of that stuff and I've put them in a post on my website, 2 posts actually. If you go to jesskeating.com, and then there's a For Writers tab. If you look at that, you will find a drop-down menu. One says Platform Development for Writers, I believe it's called, and the other one is the Social Media Playbook. And these are pretty much posts that distill everything that I've ever thought about branding or marketing or developing a platform as an author in our kind of wider community. So if for some reason you don't get a chance to ask a question today, or if something pops up later on and you can't make it, that's okay. Just check out that website. And if you do have any questions following that, feel free to send me questions anytime on Twitter. As I mentioned, I am at Jess_Keating. I'm always online, and it's kind of detrimental to my work schedule, but that's okay. I'm happy to answer your questions. So with that, I am going to move on to our first question. This is from the, I believe, earlier banks of questions that people were leaving on the website. So from Jess, is this for Jess or from? Maybe there's another Jess out there. Hello, other Jess. Did you have a website up before you were published? And if so, what was on it? That is an excellent question. I, in fact, did have a website, and it is something that I do recommend for pretty much everybody if you are looking to be published. But the caveats of this, the disclaimers are, it does not need to be this glorious, glamorous, flash, job of a website. You just need a simple landing page that has, a little bit about you in a bio. So I am Jess Keating. I love animals, science, nature, blah, 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 Captain Marvel, whatever. And this is who I am. It's nice to have a picture that shows you kind of your best self smiling out there, and a little bit about the things you write. And it is totally okay if you have a website and there's no, books tab for all your previously award-winning published titles. That is okay. Editors and agents are not looking for that. They are really just looking, number one, does this person actually exist? When a website is a decent indicator to kind of connect their query inboxes to the real world. And number two, is this somebody that I want to work with? And I mention this because I've actually spoken to a few different people about this, but there's a woman named Debbie Ohi, who's an amazing, amazing creator who you guys should look up. I believe her Twitter is @InkyElbows, like elbows. And she did a survey a long time ago about questioning agents and editors, asking, have you ever declined working with somebody or a query or something based on something you saw online? And it was something like 67% said yes, they had. So that's a case where you send off this amazing book that piques somebody's attention, and then something about them online indicated, ooh, maybe I don't want to work with this person. So in that respect, I think it is very important to have a website that just shows the very bare basics of who you are as a human individual on the other end of this network connection. And that is a very good way to show that you're being professional, show that you actually exist, and it's a chance to kind of demonstrate some of what you value, a little bit of that author branding flavor there. But again, do not stress about making it look gorgeous. A very, very simple website is absolutely fine. Okay. Also from Jess. Hello again, Jess. I noticed that your work in zoology is part of your brand. Do you ever feel locked in for the type of stories you can tell? So that is a very, very, very good question. Okay, so I do not tend to feel locked in, because even though I might be writing about something that is not specifically zoologically based, like these guys. So as of now, I've got 4 or 5 animal related books published. I've got 2 or 3 more coming down the pipeline. But as an example, I have this bad boy coming out here. This is called Elements of Genius, Nikki Tesla and the Ferret-Proof Death Ray. And even though there is a ferret right there, isn't he adorable? She. Even though there's a ferret in that book, it is not a zoology or animal related book at all. There are animals in it, but it is not me kind of pushing that element of my branding. But the voice that I embody between this book and something different like this always has a similar sort of through line for it. And hopefully that makes sense. And it's more than me just saying like, oh, well, these two things they have this in common because I wrote them. It's more an intentional element that I like to add to my writing. I like to use a lot of conversational voice. I like to use a lot of humor and jokes. And even if we're talking something like this, this book and this book are very, very different. This one's very funny, very in your face. I mentioned poop and stuff, but this one is more lyrical. It has a very different vibe to it, a very different tone to it. It is still embodying a world that is encompassed within all those things I value. Likewise with this guy, this novel has nothing to do with animals, as I mentioned, but it is about scientists and female friendship and working together like that to sort of better the planet and who you are. So that is where I think what we were first talking about with mixing your voice with your values. I think if you focus on both of those, you will never really find yourself in a position where like, oh, I really want to write about this, but it's counter to what I've been presenting online or with agents or editors. So hopefully that's helpful. And I think this is probably tied into that. Like if you are somebody who wants to write into totally separate genres, like say you want to write picture books on one hand and I don't know, erotica on another, there are people who do it, and that is where the beauty of a pen name comes in. So do not feel like you have to limit yourself or kind of meter your bandwidth based on what you're interested in. And I mean, that's a really good exercise you can do if you feel like I'm being boxed in. Get a piece of paper and write down all the things that you really, really value. And then ask yourself, am I putting things online that reflect all of these different facets of myself? So if you want to start incorporating more, I don't know, erotica or vampire fiction or something like that, you can start sort of peppering that in. And then your brand will slowly, like I mentioned, the ship will slowly start to steer a little bit more in that direction. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. From Joni, what advice do you have for someone who wants to write nonfiction picture books, but doesn't have the science bona fide credentials? Do you think it is a deterrent to publishers? Oh, Joni, that is a very, very good question. So the thing about writing nonfiction picture books, and again, for those of you who don't know, I'm coming from this I'm a zoologist. That was my first kind of training. I had my master's in zoology, and then I sort of pivoted into picture books and fiction and nonfiction from there. Of course, this is not always the case. No, I do not believe you have to have bona fide science credentials. But in order to write any nonfiction picture book, so that's like these guys, this is a biography, this is just more straight nonfiction. If you're looking to write any sort of nonfiction picture book, the secret is to realize and learn that you have to know what you don't know. And this is it's kind of a vague, annoying, jerky thing to say, but that is the thing that I find as a scientist I pick up the most on with people who are not having, these extensive science backgrounds. It's that they don't know their situated viewpoint within a bigger context. And the only answer to figure out, how do I learn? How do I know what I don't know? How do I find this stuff out? Is to do very, very, very extensive research. And even though you aren't a scientist, that does not mean that you cannot contact a scientist or many, many scientists to look at what you're trying to accomplish. And I think, Twitter is a really amazing thing for that. Like their science Twitter, like if you just look up hashtag science Twitter or hashtag bird Twitter, hashtag shark Twitter, you will actually find these gigantic communities of people who are these scientists basically alone in their laboratories like cave trolls, dying to get their information out. So if you reach out to them, I know they will be more than happy to help you. And that pretty much stands across the board for any sort of nonfiction book you would like to write. So hopefully that helps. I know it's not very helpful to be like, the only way to know what you don't know is to learn everything. But that really is kind of, I think, as a scientist, the only answer. And that is how I approach it too. As a zoologist, I do not know everything by any stretch about the things that I cover, but I know enough about the context to recognize, oh, I've got blank spots in my knowledge here, and then I can go fill them in. So hopefully that helps you. Oh, and do I think it's a deterrent to different publishers? No, I absolutely don't. I think if you have shown that you have the wherewithal to do the appropriate research and to put the time into it there, and you're presenting the information in a way that is wonderful and fresh and makes sense, I do not think it's a deterrent at all. One thing I will add to this is sort of an additional point. Oftentimes, many publishers have amazing copy editors, and they are basically doing God's work on the planet. But it is also sometimes difficult to find people if you're doing a very, very niche subject. So blobfish, for example, the onus is often on you as an author to really bring your A game and challenge yourself on whatever facts you're putting out there. So keep that in mind. Okay, Tara, how do you choose a brand if you don't have a specific niche like you do with zoology? How do you decide what your brand will be, especially if you write YA, MG, and picture books and want to carry readers through all three and not use a pen name? That is a great question. So it is totally okay to write in all these different genres. I do it, it works, and it can be done, I promise you. And using a pen name or not, that's really up to you, and you can do all three, provided that the tone and content is not such a drastic shift that, like I mentioned before, if you're writing rhyming picture books and then hardcore erotica or something, your agent or editor might be like, maybe we use an initial on a cover rather than not, just for the sake of clarity for your readership. So how do you choose a brand if you don't have a specific niche? If you don't have a specific niche, that is okay, because you are actually the niche. So this goes back to what I was saying about what you value and the voice you use. So my niche happens to include a lot of zoology, because that is kind of the lens through which I see the world, or a lot of science, I should say, because it includes this type of book now. Your niche is what you are an expert in. And, I get a little bit of backlash sometimes when I say that, because it's like, oh, I don't have the credentials in this, but you do have credentials in being yourself, and you are the expert in being yourself. And if you can present that with authority, I'm telling you, people just flock to that. They really love to have somebody who stands kind of proudly in their own weirdness and embraces those weird, strange things about them. That becomes your niche. So, for an example, you could ask yourself, okay, what are 10 things, if you had, $1 million and you could donate to one cause, what cause would you pick? That is something that I would argue you can include in your niche, because it's something that matters so, so much to you. Maybe it's, education and literacy. Maybe it's conservation and saving the planet. Maybe it's, you would donate, money to go on a date with Jake Gyllenhaal, because I'm thinking of the new Mysterio Spider-Man trailer that just dropped today. All of those things that can become part of your niche. So if you ask yourself, what is really, really, really important to me, that is your niche. And then your next question is, how do I want to present this online? What voice do I want to use? Some people get away with, a more snarky, sarcastic voice, which can work great. That's fantastic. Some people have a more optimistic approach. Some people just kind of make little comments about certain things. Any sort of voice that feels like it's real to you is perfect. So hopefully that is a good start for you. From Jessica. A lot of Jessica. I swear to God, it's not just me pretending to write questions to myself. How long does a typical illustration take after rough sketch when you go to do final art? How much time do you plan for completion of an entire picture book process? Any advice on planning or time frames? Oh my gosh. Okay, so Jessica, I am an artist and I do illustrate on my own right now on the side. I have not published any of my own illustrative works, but I think I know a little bit enough about what I don't know to answer this question for you. It can take a various amount of times for how did you word it here? How much time? Rough sketch to final art. It can totally depend on your publisher's deadline and your deadlines, and it can also depend on your mediums, the media that you use. If you're doing digital, it might be a different case rather than if you're doing, heavy watercolor or something. So in my case, I tend to do a lot of mix of digital with traditional ink effects that I'm overlaying over top of them. So that can be quick sometimes, that can be a long thing sometimes, but I wouldn't get too concerned about it, because when you are working with a publisher, they will be working around your schedule anyway. And that is something that, if you land a contract for a picture book and you're deep down thinking like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? That is when you speak to your agent and they will help you work out a schedule that works for you. Any advice on planning or time frames? My only advice on planning, and this is kind of a broader context of, illustrating, but also writing picture books, is always be writing or working on the next thing. If you're an illustrator, presumably Jessica, I think right now, you want to be looking at creating pieces for your portfolio that showcase, all your different ranges and stuff. You might want to be doing some, fan art or something personally to kind of keep you motivated inside. And then if you're working on any active contracted picture books, of course, those are going to take precedence. So hopefully that helps. And also, if I didn't get to something and you have a specific question about illustration, the hashtag #KidLitArt is a very, very good one that can hopefully help you out too. Okay, Helen, I'm going to get a drink. Can you tell us about how/why your published works began with fiction and moved into nonfiction? I love that your zoology background is a thread running through all of them. Thank you very much, Helen. I love that too, because it is stuff that just gets me going. Okay, So a funny story about how I initially got into writing and being an author, and this is, you know, that meme going around right now, like 2019 or 2009 me and 2019 me. So I have been doing this gig for over 10 years now, and I think it was, oh gosh, I won't even date myself. And I had just wrapped up a master's in zoology. And I very much literally woke up one day, and instead of being a professor, which was my original plan, you know, from the start, I pivoted and I woke up and I said, I think I want to write picture books. And you can imagine how my parents reacted to that after dumping all this time into my graduate programs and stuff. But of course, there was no wasted education. And now my background in science has given me this sort of edge that I can bring into all these different types of books I write. So what I told myself was, and I do not recommend this for anybody, this is purely anecdotal. I wrote my first novel, and it was called How to Outrun a Crocodile When Your Shoes Are Untied. And it was about a little girl named Anna, who was named after an anaconda, and she lived in a zoo. And as you can tell, there's a little bit of zoology under there hiding, but it was fiction. And I told myself, okay, I'm going to give myself a year, and if I can find an agent in that time, then I'm going to just see if I can actually do this for a living. And if not, I'm going to forget about it and just, you know, do, I don't know, underwater basket weaving or something. And it was about a year and 2 days that I landed my incredible agent, and, you know, the rest is history. So my very first book, despite the fact that I'm a zoologist and this science nerdy person, was actually fiction. But when I started publishing those books, it was kind of like I was mentioning with the, you know, shifting your ship a little bit. I knew that I wanted to start incorporating more nonfiction into the mix because it was something that it means so much to me. I am somebody who is endlessly fascinated about the natural world around us. And it really did feel like I was keeping something to myself that I did not want to keep to myself. I am somebody who I get my joy, my sense of joy out of telling other people about these amazing things. So that is how that happened. I realized, you know, my first novel came out that was fiction. And I knew very, very quickly, okay, I want to start bringing kind of like a group hug, all these things that I love together into one big sort of medley. And it was a very intentional move on my part. It was very strategic, I'll say, you know, working with myself and my wonderful agent. How do we best do this? What types of books would play in best to introduce people to this, you know, more scientific side of me? And it was kind of a long game approach, which I'm still playing. I mean, let's be real, we're all playing the long game. So hopefully that helps. Also from Helen, make sure I don't miss anything. Do you have, I lost it, any advice about breaking into the industry via fiction versus nonfiction for writers who do both? When the goal is to find an agent who can help you sell both types of work, is there advantage to leading with one versus the other? Oh, wonderful question. Okay, so the first thing you need to know about this is you always want to lead with your very, very, very best. And I know that we as writers want to be like, oh, but every book I've written is just, you know, Academy Award level winning writing. But the reality is there's probably something that's a little bit stronger, either because you've spent more time on it or you've had more feedback on it. Basically, you want to lead with that one. And then when you're querying an agent, you say to them, I'm this book, you know, Roger Dodger by Jess Keating is a fiction picture book, but as a such and such zoologist or pharmacist or, you know, whatever, I also publish books about this, and this. And what will happen is if the agent likes that first book you sent them, they will say, oh, I love this. Tell me about all your other stuff and send me samples of your other stuff. So it is okay to lead with whatever one you think is best. But what I wouldn't do is send them everything. Like, you don't want to send them an email like, hi, I'm querying you today with this book, but I also write novels, so I'm sending you one of those too, or I'm sending you a sample of one of those as well. You don't want to do that, only because it's going to be kind of like death by fire hose. They just need to see a little peek. It's really an introduction. And once you've got that introduction and that door is open, then it's a free-for-all, and you can have a conversation with them about, okay, I want to write all these different things, and I want to make sure that I do it mindfully, you know, keeping in mind, you know, my career as a whole. And that is what agents are there to do. So hopefully that helps. Okay. One that goes, I think I answered that. No what? Yeah, the only advice about breaking into the industry via fiction and non is if you want to do both, put both out there. And this includes things that you're tweeting about. Be active in the fiction community on Twitter or in whatever forum that you're talking about, you know, Facebook or whatever. I personally like Twitter best because it seems to be the less I wouldn't say it's less time consuming, but there's less opportunities for like tangents that will take you down, you know, down this path lies badness, if you know what I mean. There's less opportunity for that there. So if you're looking to do fiction and nonfiction, put both out there, you know, make sure that you're representing all parts of yourself that you want to be in the world, and don't feel like they're fighting with each other because the common denominator is always you. Okay. What do you define as an author brand, and how much time do you think writers should devote to branding? Okay, so I mentioned this a little bit when we started off here. I believe an author brand is the vibe that you put out generally. And it can be, you know, any number of adjectives. I would say my general author vibe is, you know, I'm personable, hopefully I'm approachable, I try to be funny and upbeat, I try to be very smart and share, you know, scientifically minded things, I'm very evidence-based. That is my author brand, kind of goofy, lots of axolotls and weird animals, of course. So that's an example of mine. But where you see an author brand begin to actually work is when you start connecting with your actual audience. And I would define a brand as when somebody you don't know is out in the world and spots something and says, oh, that reminds me of Jess Keating, or that reminds me of so-and-so, and then brings that to you and says, this reminded me of you. That line right there, whatever that thing is your author brand. Your author brand, I believe, is the connection, mindful, intentional, hopefully, between you as an author and a writer online and a real person in the world. So that is how I see it. And of course, this is just grain of salt, you know, take it with a big grain of salt because this is my opinion. I do not believe that everybody has the same, you know, description of an author brand. And I know there are people who would approach author branding as more of a, you know, it's work to be done. Whereas I don't think that branding oneself takes work other than the fact that we have to curate and cultivate, you know, intentionally. Like, I'm not just going to stream of consciousness, put things online. I need to cultivate that. But in terms of what I'm putting out there, it does not work for me to find a, you know, to have a cute little axolotl video or to share something about, you know, an amazing scientist like Eugenie Clark. It does not work for me because as a person in the world, these are the things coming into my life that I love and that I pay attention to. So it doesn't take much work for me to be like, hey guys, look at this awesome thing that I found. So there was one other question to that. How much time do you think writers should devote to branding? Again, I think it depends on your goals. I do not suggest going out there with a goal of, oh, I want to have 10,000 followers by tomorrow, or I want, you know, Spider-Man to follow me or something like that. I don't think those are goals that are really fruitful for you, but you can totally have a goal of, I want to become more authentic myself online, and I want to meet other people that are like-minded with my interests. You know, if I was opening a pie shop, and I'm back to pies again, apparently I'm hungry. If I was opening a pie shop and I wanted to put time into this author branding, or pie branding, I should say, baker branding, my goal would be something like, okay, I want to try to meet as many like-minded bakers as I can online, and I'm going to do that by tweeting, you know, one or two things every day that will attract those types of people. You know, maybe I'm looking at particular hashtags, like in our community, we have so many hashtags. We've got hashtag MG Lit, which is middle grade, hashtag YA Lit, hashtag Kid Lit, hashtag Kid Lit Art. There's, Nerdy Book Club is an amazing hashtag that you have to check out. So that is what I would say most of the work should go into. But when it comes to, you know, how much time you want to spend putting things out there that you yourself are either creating or curating, it's really up to your own priorities. I probably spend too much time online because it's the thing that I tend to do when I finish, you know, copy editing a book. I'll be like, oh, I'll just go on Twitter for a little bit. And then I look up and half an hour has gone by and like, it's just awful. But if you have that free time, go for it. But otherwise, you can very specifically say, okay, I'm going to spend 20 minutes just cruising around on Twitter, following a few people, checking a few people out to see what resonates with me, and maybe posting a thing or two. So you can really make that work for you no matter what your schedule. Okay, make sure I can find it here. From Lauren. Hello, Lauren. You've been able to cultivate a level of trust in your readers. Oh, well, this reader, that a Jess Keating book, oh gosh, I didn't type this, I promise. That a Jess Keating book will be humorous, informative, and engaging. Besides writing spectacular books and tweeting fascinating facts, what else do you think has helped you establish this reputation and brand? First of all, Lauren, thank you. I swear I didn't pay her to say that. That's really lovely. So this is something that it's a really great question, actually, not just because it makes me feel great, but because it was a very intentional move on my part. And that's not to say it was disingenuous. It was intentional in that when I was first starting out, and I'm talking, 10 years ago, before, any of my books had come out, before I was anybody online in any respect, I asked myself, okay, what is my big goal? And this is a question that I think when you're trying to determine your author brand, this is probably the number one thing. If you could distill this down, what is my very, very, very big goal? Then you can use that to inform how you want to approach this thing. So for me, when I was looking at kind of the world around me, some examples of big goals, I want to be like Kim Kardashian in that I want to be famous, I want to have lots of followers, and I want to be able to tweet and say, pretty much anything I want, some shock value in there, perfectly valid goal. My goal was, I was looking at all the people that I respected and the corporations even that I respected that did the sort of thing that were kind of in the same lane that I wanted to be in. So for me, some examples of that, it sounds really cheesy, but some examples were things like Sesame Street, PBS, Discovery Channel to some degree, despite the fact that they have that horrible mermaid documentary that just drove me up the wall because it's just not true. But those are companies and, I would say entities that embody, integrity and intelligence, trust, a reputation that I would, probably describe as like honorable, I think, and they can use their different voices and values behind that vibe. So my question to myself, who do I, what's the big dream? Who am I looking to kind of as a North Star here? That was my answer. So because of that, that really informed a lot of how I approached and still approach all of my interactions online. I have what I call the sunshine rule, which if you read this post that I mentioned, about 40 minutes ago, my rule is I do not post anything negative online. And it is not because I'm thinking that, I'm always this happy-go-lucky positive person. If you know me, you know that, I've got some pretty strong opinions about things. It's just that I do not want to put negativity out there. If I am ever tweeting about problematic things, of which there are many, I think we need to deal with sexism and all these horrible, injustices in the world. I choose to do it by promoting and leveraging somebody who is trying to do something positive about it. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So there's a way to tackle negative and problematic content in such a way that you are being positive. And that was my MO. It might not be yours, and that is totally cool. If that's part of your brand, like good on you. But that was my kind of sunshine rule. And I grabbed that from those people like, Sesame Street, or, those corporations or entities or trusted resources like Mr. Rogers. If I have to ever question, like, do I put this online? Is this something that, I want out there as attached to my name? A good question is like, would Mr. Rogers do it? That's a really good answer for me, because instinctively you just kind of have this sense like, that's a little snarky, Jess. Like maybe we tone it down a little bit, or maybe we try to elevate another voice who's doing good to tackle this problem. So hopefully that is a really, really long-winded answer, but hopefully that steers you guys a little bit in where you're looking. Thank you very much. Also from Lauren, do you ever provide critique services or consultations to authors who have done a ton of research, but need to make sure they've hit the mark before submitting to their agent? Oh, great question, Lauren. I do not typically provide critiques or consultations. I know there are tons of them online, tons of authors who do this. I will tell you this right now, and I'm hopefully not ruining anything if she's changed her mind. One author that I know and adore, her name is Carter Higgins, and I believe she recently posted on an Instagram story that she was now doing manuscript consultations, and she just writes these amazing, it's like you pull your heart out and put it on a page. That is a Carter Higgins type book. And speaking of branding, when I think of Carter Higgins, that is what I think of, right? I think of those really heartfelt, lovely, nostalgic moments. That is because her brand is so in line with who she is. So I do not offer those consultations, but I know Carter does, Carter Higgins, and I believe you can find her at Carter Higgins on Twitter. If not, just Google her. But there are a bazillion others who are probably going to be peeved at me for not mentioning their name. They're lost off the top of my head right now. But I do not myself. Should writers try to have a presence across several social media sites or stick to one or two? This is a fantastic, fantastic question, because I think that we can get, what's the word? Bogged down by opportunity, and there tends to be a little bit of paralysis by analysis sometimes. If you've got so many options, you're going to feel a little bit overwhelmed and inundated. So what I suggest is to try them all out. Just try them. Put your name up there, put a little profile picture, and just kind of get your toes wet and see what resonates for you. And then if you find there is one that works for you, just do that one. Don't feel like you need to be everywhere online. I believe when I started out, I was on Twitter, I had a blog, I was kind of on Instagram, and I was not on Facebook. Maybe five or so years into my career, I was everywhere just because that was what I wanted to do at the time. And then I was on YouTube, and now I've kind of pared these down to what I would say are the essentials that drive my career forward the most. So that is Instagram. I like, because again, I'm getting more into illustrative works and stuff. That is something that matters to me visually, of course. Twitter, I still find to be the #1 platform, I would say, for authors, just because there's so many agents and editors and other authors online at all different levels and, aspects of their career that you can learn from. And we all tend to be quite friendly and, easygoing. And it does really get to be kind of a beautiful little community. But no, do not feel like you have to do everything. You are not everything to everybody, and it is okay to do what you want to do. And the other second half of this, answer is, if you don't like your time on some particular social media platform, your readers or your viewers of whatever that platform is, they will know it. Like, we can tell, we have kind of the BS test, right? When somebody's not really, their heart isn't really in it, they're just kind of like, there. So I think it's totally cool to just do what you want to do and forget the rest. Okay. Should authors use pen names if they are planning to write outside their established brand? If so, should authors create multiple websites and social media accounts for each persona, or only use one and mention the various pen names in that bio? Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is a question that it'll probably be a shorter version of an answer, just because you could go on forever about this. The first, I don't know who mentioned that question. Sorry, I don't have your name, but thank you for the question. The first thing to keep in mind is, I would probably start with one. If you're just getting established on social media, I would probably start with one and then put out different versions of what you're interested in via your tweets or something. So if you're interested in romance and picture books and, I don't know, chocolate, put a little bit of everything out, and you need to get a sense of the landscapes of each of those areas. And then if you're looking to further, diversify, or you've got books coming out in all these different genres, then that is when I would say you would talk to your agent or even the editor that you're working with for a particular book, and just kind of get a sense of, is this book going to not compete? Compete isn't the right word, but fight against, your earlier work. So if I was writing, vampire erotica, I mean, there is some wiggle room in my brand because of the particular voice I have, but there also might be some editors that are like, maybe we use Jay Keating instead of Jess Keating, considering you also are a trusted source of, feminist biographies, right? So that is something that really, I don't think there's one particular answer that's going to work for everybody. I think it's more a case of what's going to work for you, and don't underestimate your ability to bring all those parts of yourself into one brand or into one sort of persona online. Because again, the common denominator is you. I think if you are very strategic and very intentional about what you're putting out there, and in particular, the voice that you're using to put it out there, I think you could make almost anything work. And of course, the outliers to that would be like, 50 Shades of Grey and Dr. Seuss, right? But even then, I think there's an argument to be made that it might help. You never know. Okay. Any tips for for balancing time between actual writing and building your brand, mainly on social media or school visits or other, especially if you work full-time also? Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is a tough question, right? Because we are all very different. We all have very different priorities, and we all have very different goals. But I tend to think that balance on its own, like, as in like I'm living a life of balance. I don't think that balance actually exists in a particular moment, especially not in my experience, put it that way. I think that balance over the long game can exist. And that is what I strive to. So in that respect, my version of balance is being mindful of the parts of myself that I let lead in a particular time frame. So there are days where, so when I was working on this bad boy, so this book is out in July 9th, I believe, and the next book is actually already finished. And that is because we actually moved the deadline up by about 6-7 months. So that is fantastic and wonderful. But it meant that at the time when that deadline was moved and that original final date was moved, it meant that my sense of like balanced home life, it kind of goes out the window, right? Because I have to pour my heart and soul into this, because I'll be damned if I'm missing a deadline, and if I can avoid it. So in that particular moment, during that span of, months or weeks, I would not say it was a balance. It was me doing what I needed to do, the same as you would do what you need to do. You need to get the kids to school, you need to make dinners, you need to clean the house, you need to work on branding. But over time, over the course of a year, my year was balanced, because I spent time writing new things. I spent time online doing, branding, whatever. I spent time in school visits. I spent time working on brand new things that aren't under contract. All of those things come into play when it comes to balance. So I would say, number one, take a mental health self-check, first of all. That is your health, and your physical health and your mental health are, in my opinion, your first and foremost priority. And I do not believe that anything is really worth sacrificing those to such a degree that you start to, feel degraded physically or maybe in your soul. But the next thing you can do is ask yourself, okay, where am I prioritizing my time? And what goal do I have, and how far away am I from it? So if you feel like I really need to up the amount of new stuff that I'm putting out, say you have a goal of writing, 5 or 10 picture books this year, if you feel you have to pull back on school visits, or if you feel you have to pull back on doing the dishes, outsource that stuff if you can. If you need to pull back and maybe have different expectations for yourself, go easy on yourself in all of these other areas. It is okay. And I mean, we as, people, and I won't specify one gender over another here, but I do think women also put a lot on ourselves, because we're trying to, accomplish family life and all these things. And that is not to say that fathers are not too. But in my anecdotal evidence, I seem to meet a lot of women that are trying to do all these things, have all these different plates spinning. So I think that it is totally okay to go easy on yourself and not hold yourself to such a high standard that you have to always be in balance, first of all, and be accomplishing and being perfect at everything. And I mean, I can't remember who said it, but an imperfect action is much better than perfect inaction, right? I'm sorry, whoever said it, good quote. I didn't come up with it, but I think it's something that we tend to couch perfectionism in that talk that we have about balance. And I just don't think it's not efficient for me to try to be perfect or to try to be always in balance. So that's why I shifted. Instead, I look at my long range game, my year, is my year balanced? Was I able to sort of accomplish most of the things that I tried to do and do it in a way where at the end of it, I did not feel physically, blah, and I did not feel mentally like burnt out. So hopefully that helps. I know it's a really long-winded answer, but there you go. Okay. Hopefully I'm not missing one. Okay. Do you have any tips for creating author bios, blurbs, or those catchy taglines everyone seems to hate writing? Oh gosh. Okay. So you want to know the truth of it. We're getting real here on Right On Con. I love writing blurbs. I love writing taglines. I even love writing query letters and synopses. I love them. First of all, and I know, yeah, you're all just left. You're like, forget it. She's nuts. I love a query. I write a query for every book that I write and I send to my agent. And even though I don't need to now, she's my agent. She will just read it. I still write a query letter because a query tells me, yes, I've got this book figured out. Does that make sense? Like, I'm asking like my computer, of course. Does that make sense, computer? It tells me if there are any holes in the motivations that the characters have, in the stakes, in a little bit of the plot. It tells me all that stuff. And the same goes for writing a synopsis. So I do not hate writing those things. And I also love writing pitches and taglines. Oftentimes your agent will send like a little, really fun pitch to editors with your book when you're submitting, like, in a world where Tom Cruise has only one hand, like those types of pitches. Sometimes the agent writes that and sometimes the author does. I love writing that stuff. But my suggestion is, if you hate writing that stuff, but you want to get better at it, and you're going to hate me for this, you just have to practice. I know it's not a fun answer. It's a horrible thing to say, but there are lots of resources online for writing, query letters or synopses, taglines. If you're looking for taglines in particular, just because they're kind of fun and jazzy to play with, the book Save the Cat has some really good information about writing a log line or a tagline. But also pay attention to the popular ones that you see. I actually have a Word document of all the really great taglines from movies and all the great like pitches that I've seen from different books and stuff like that. And I keep those because, believe it or not, like most things in life, there is a formula underneath all that stuff. There's a formula to entire books. Like when I'm writing novels, I use what I consider to be my formula. And I know it sounds like, oh, you're going to have something boring. That's not true. Formulas allow you to be fully creative because it gives you a structure to play within. So I would keep all the cool stuff that you come across, like those nerdy taglines and stuff like that. And then you can look at them. When you see 50 taglines for movies on a page, those patterns will start to come out. And then you will be able to use those and rework them kind of like a puzzle to come up with your own. So hopefully that helps. And this makes me think of like one of my favorite taglines, which was like one of the later Die Hard movies, which was just Yippee-ki-yay, Mother Russia. Right? Because he was in Russia? I'm sorry. It's one of the best things ever. All right. Do you ever take social media breaks to devote time to new projects or other interests? And what is the overall effect on your brand? Oh, very good question. I know lots of people. It's funny. Most people, if I notice them taking a social media break, some people will change their Twitter name to be like, Jess Keating is on a social media hiatus, right? But the funny thing is, I know that about them because they're tweeting, right? So I don't tend to broadcast that I'm going on a social media break. Personally, I don't think that it's anyone's business, but it's not really why I don't say it. I don't say it because it doesn't accomplish anything for me. Because people will still continue to email me and they will either have to wait a few days to hear back, or I will get back to them, because sometimes social media breaks, you're still checking email, that kind of thing. It just doesn't make sense for me to broadcast it. But I do take social media breaks in that I will be like, that's enough internet for today. And then I will go off and do something else. I tend to be quite I've always worked for myself. for the most part, apart from when I was, doing zoology, but even then I'm alone in a field. So what are they going to do? I have always worked myself, so I tend to be quite disciplined in my own scheduling. So I don't typically have a big problem with social media infringing on my time like that. But I do know lots of people that take social media breaks. And I would say, the question, what overall effect does it have on your brand? Oh, and I have a 5-minute warning. If you're worried about the overall effect on your brand, but you want to take a social media break, my honest to God best advice is forget about it. Do it anyway. Don't worry about the effect on your brand, because you up here and in your body matter more than anything, more than any brand, more than any goal you can accomplish online, more than being there for other people. If you have this kind of, that little intuitive voice inside of you saying, I need a break from this nonsense, from this craziness that I'm seeing online, it happens. Take it. Don't worry about the consequences. Take your break. Come back when you're refreshed. Nobody's going to notice. I promise. And I mean that in a good way. I mean it like nobody noticed, not like nobody noticed. Okay. I've heard that blogging is dead as a way to attract editor and or reader interest. Is this true? Is the answer different between updates, appearances, book releases, etc., versus actual content, research, writing advice, etc.? Okay, so I have also heard that blogging is dead, and funnily enough, I still know a lot of people that do it, and it seems to serve them well. So my number one piece of advice here is, if you are considering blogging, but you're worried about it being dead, or will it accomplish what I want it to accomplish, is ask yourself, do I really love and or want to blog? Do I want to be blogging right now? Do I have fun blogging? And if the answer takes you to yes, do it. Because it will never, ever, ever hurt you to have more of yourself online that presents a positive view of what you value and what you represent and the voice that you use, right? That is part of your brand. That is cool. However, if you are saying to yourself, do I want to blog? It might be dead. And you just kind of have this sense of like, your body is clenching on itself at the thought of it, then don't do it, because it will A, not be worth all that physical, mental, emotional strain on you, but B, I don't think that a blog is something that will ever make or break your career as an author. So the last part of the question, is there a difference between having, a web page or like a landing page of sorts that's like, these are my appearances, these are, different book releases and stuff. There is that version of a website, and then there is the active blogging version of a website, which is where I'm posting, updates and, not just updates, but like content that I'm creating for you in the form of a post or an article. Those are two different things. The one that is about who you are as a person and like your author bio, I would always recommend having. The version of a blog that is you posting articles and posts and stuff, I do not think is necessary. My opinion, but again, if you are drawn to it, good on you, man. Have fun doing it. Okay. I'm really shy. Is there a way to be memorable without needing to step too far outside of my comfort zone? Oh, what a sweet question. Okay, so fun fact, people tend to think that I'm an extrovert, right? I am not. I promise you, I am the equivalent of a cave troll. I can be public online. I can be public in person. I happen to love public speaking. I used to be, a singer professionally. That is what I did kind of in my downtime to earn some extra cash. So as such, I have learned that there are a great many benefits to being somebody who, despite an inherent introversion, can become somebody who is extroverted when I need to. And this is going to sound really, really callous and heartless, but I don't want it to be coming across like this. It is okay to be shy, but I still think that it serves us all to push our skills and to push out of our comfort zones in the ways that we can manage them to do it, can manage to do it. You know what I mean? I'm not saying if you're super shy, become someone, go on stage tomorrow and sing karaoke. I'm saying I do think that we sometimes tend to underestimate our own ability to push through challenges. And, this is going to sound like really like cheeseball, but like, my trainer, like I do a lot of training and like fitness, extreme fitness and stuff. My trainer always says like the version of yourself that you want to be is at the other end of this challenge, is at the other end of this comfort zone. right? So if you're looking at being somebody memorable, I can't believe I just did that. Ugh. If you're looking at being somebody memorable and your version of that is somebody who's kind of out there online, if that is what you want to be doing, I would recommend very slowly in methodical steps, pushing yourself to be out there, because there's nothing worse than the regret of thinking, oh, I should have done this differently. You know, don't feel hindered by your shyness. In fact, there are lots of people who are very, very, very debilitatingly shy that can still find ways to get their voice out there. So maybe it's a case of brainstorming. What can I do that pushes me just a little bit outside of that comfort zone that doesn't feel like it's an attack on every single sense I have? I hope that helps. And I hope that's a meaningful answer. And I hope that all of these questions, I have a 1-minute warning. After this question, feel free to wrap up and say goodbye. I have a 1-minute warning here. As I mentioned, if you have anything that you want to ask me at any time, it doesn't just need to be today. You can go to my Twitter page, which is at Jess_Keating. Keep the underscore there, because if not, you're going to get somebody else who's going to be like, who are these people? And I will happily answer your questions there. You can also find me on Instagram. I am at Jess Keating Books. And my website that has the 2 social media posts that I mentioned is jesskeating.com. So thank you very, very much. I hope this was helpful. You are all wonderful people. And if there's anything I can do to help you, do not hesitate to reach out, because I think you are awesome. Okay, I will sign off for now, but have a good one, guys. Thank you.